Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The Rangers lose to the Islanders by a final score of 5-2. And what was the big news of the day for the Rangers is about an hour before the game, it was announced that Artemi Panarin would be held out of the lineup for roster management purposes. And so somewhere soon here, Artemi Panarin will be traded, which is not a surprise, but we didn't know when it would be. And so, in all likelihood, Artemi Panarin has played his last game as a New York Ranger. And we'll get more into Panarin on the trade episode. But yeah, it turns out that that game against the Bruins, the Rangers won in overtime, was in fact Artemi Panarin's last game. And look, I'm totally good with it, right? In terms of, it would have been terrible if somehow he got hurt. Like, for all the reasons involved, if you know you're going to trade him, which they are, let it be sooner than later, right? As long as the what you get back in return for Panarin doesn't change, which it wouldn't. Panarin is like, it's not as if his value will increase if you trade him close to the March 6th deadline. If anything, now the team who gets him will have him for a little bit longer. Obviously, there's that long February break with the Olympics, but still, you at least maybe get, and let's just even say that Panarin doesn't play, which he still could, for the team that acquires him. Maybe he doesn't play before the Olympics. Maybe he does. Depends when the trade goes down. We'll find out, hopefully soon enough. But even after the break, he'll get a week and a half or so of action. But again, that's not a whole, a big deal here. But very curious to see what the return will be, where he's going. But, Panarin really was, one of the best Ranger forwards that I've ever seen, really since Jaromir Jagr. One of the best free agent signings, and to do it in New York, where that was many a times where big name players would come here and just not succeed for a number of different reasons. Panarin was unbelievable statistically. One of the best offensive players in the league, year in, year out. Very consistent. Some years better than others, of course, but his postseasons left lots to be desired. But Panarin, obviously what he did on the ice speaks for itself. Off the ice, there's some things to discuss there, but we'll get more into that on the Panarin trade episode, where we'll discuss sort of his career as a Ranger and all that sort of stuff. But that is still, from a Rangers perspective, the biggest news of the day. And so, we will wait on that. And as soon as, news breaks, we'll certainly be here to discuss all the ins and outs of the potential Artemi Panarin trade. So the Rangers lose the Islanders, like I said, by a final score of 5-2. The Islanders had just made a couple of deals. Obviously, we know about the Carson Soucy trade, which, Soucy didn't look great. But it kind of was what it was, right? With Carson Soucy, he's not really much of an offensive player. He's okay defensively. He was not great last year when the Rangers acquired him, so there could be some growing pains there as well. Changing systems and whatnot. But he'll be mainly on the third pair. Would be my guess. I feel behind Schaefer and Pelech on the left side for the Islanders. But it was his first game as an Islander, and as well Andre Palat. And, wouldn't you know it, Andre Palat, who really struggled with the Devils, and it was really a cap dump where the Islanders, they traded Siplikov to the Devils, and the Devils traded the Islanders a 3rd and 6th round pick, really for the reason of, taking on Palat's contract in full, which the Islanders did, which he's under contract next year as well. But of course, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but, because Andre Palat was a Tampa Bay Lightning player for a long time, and, as a Ranger fan, a lot of bad memories there. Whether it be, I'm thinking more so 2022, but even 2015. I mean, it spans quite a while with Palat. And of course, he scores the first goal in this game. Again, not that I'm all about the Rangers losing games, so it's not like I was, annoyed by it, but it was typical, if nothing else, right? If it wasn't going to be Carson Soucy, which it likely wasn't going to be, because again, he's not much of a goal scorer, Andre Palat in his first game as an Islander scores. But as far as the Rangers go, with this being a back-to-back, the goalie matchup was Spencer Martin versus David Riddick. So at MSG for the second game, and again, the Rangers have been very bad in back-to-back situations. What's the count now? I think 0-7-1 after they had lost against the Kings last week is where it sits now. I believe I'll confirm that going into, when we discuss tomorrow's episode of this Ranger Island game. This game being at UBS, tomorrow night's being in Madison Square Garden. But this was um, the backups, if you will. Although at this point for the Rangers, it feels like Quick and Martin really are on kind of a 50-50 split, regardless of anything. But even still, you should get a little bit more of a high quality goalie matchup when it comes to Sorokin versus Quick, at the very least on the Sorokin side. But here, the Rangers do finally break through. I mean, they had been shut out the first two games versus the Islanders. At least in this game, they did score 2 goals. But yeah, Martin versus Riddick. And as far as the Rangers go, defensively, it was the same pairs, same players in. And the one player that was out at a healthy scratch was Connor Mackey. So he's still looking to get into his first Ranger game this season. And with the forward group, because of the Panarin situation with him being out, Johnny Brodzinski enters the lineup. So they keep the Zibanejad line intact. And the Trocheck line has Will Cooley move up. For the Lava line, Taylor Radish moves up. And then so Brodzinski takes the spot on the fourth line, is how that goes. And this was a game where, look, the Rangers, they're undermanned to begin with. And then you take Artemi Panarin out of the equation and kind of in the abruptness in which it was, right? Everyone knew that Panarin was likely to be traded, but it all kind of came together, I think, late. Because if you looked at the practice and the signs, all signs dictated that Panarin was going to play, just as he had been. And all of a sudden, at 6 o'clock, it's announced he's out. And so that kind of just throws the team even more for a loop. Again, not that they're good to begin with. But yeah, as far as, it's tough. Evaluation-wise, it's tough in a game like this to say a whole lot. So I say we may as well just jump into the game. Again, roster was what it was. I would expect a forward to be called up, to be the 13th forward or whoever, or maybe like Brodzinski, or maybe they call someone up who's a young player and Brodzinski goes back to the bench. Something like that, is likely to happen. But the Islanders really, really did dominate for most of the first period. They controlled the play. For a while, the shot count was low on both sides, but it picked up for the Islanders. I mean, it got to a point where the Islanders, I think, were outshooting the Rangers about 10-1 or so. Look, the Islanders have just a much better roster currently than this Ranger team, right? And like I keep on saying, and I don't mind that Shesterkin and Fox are out, but as long as they're out, the Rangers are truly one of the 2 worst teams in the NHL. When Fox and Shesterkin comes back, then you're more like a bottom 5 to bottom 7 team. You're still bad, but you're not this level bad. And, I doubt we're going to see Shesterkin or Fox until after the Olympic break. But even then, I know they'll be back, but I kind of don't want them back. But, I get it, right? Like, if they're healthy, which they will be by then, presumably, they're going to play. But it will, and, those 2 players playing, it's going to make a difference, even without Panarin. But either way, this is obviously not a very good Ranger team, as we know. So, not a whole lot going on. Look, the Islanders are definitely the ones that are definitely, like I said, dictating play the first half of the first period, no doubt. And the Rangers are struggling to get shots on goal. And then all of a sudden, penalties were a pretty big deal in this game. And it was really mostly to the benefit of the Islanders. They were the ones that ended up on the power play more than the Rangers, and they did ultimately take advantage of that. And it starts with Alexis Lafreniere slashing Matt Barzal 11:33. Now, with Lafreniere, who was on the number 1 power play unit, with Panarin being gone, Lafreniere did, get a spot on the number 1 power play unit, which you might as well. Like, you should. But still, I'm curious, and I doubt it's going to change much. It's probably going to go more of the negative, if anything. But, now that Panarin's gone, and those 2 have been on the same line quite a bit, in the last few years. For the most part, I'd say they have been. What is Alexis Lafreniere going to give you now that, look, as more players move out, Lafreniere becomes more and more one of the longer tenured players on this team. Even though it may not feel that way, he is. I mean, I'm not going to give the number right now, but he's at least top 5 in terms of longest tenured on this club. But you want to see a lot more from him. It's just been a disappointment, and it's hard to feel optimistic about Lafreniere, certainly the rest of the season, and just even beyond that, as far as him really turning things around. But he slashes Matt Barzal, but then 9 seconds later, with the Islanders having a power play, Bo Horvat interferes with Mika Zibanejad, where his stick ends up, going into the stands, actually. So it's 4-on-4 for a little bit, but before that's over, about 30 seconds left on the Lafreniere penalty, Vincent Trocheck slashes Simon Holmstrom. And Vincent Trocheck, who I think is probably the next big name, obviously Panarin hasn't been traded yet, but once that happens, Trocheck, I think, is going to be the next big name that you're waiting to see, is he traded or not? And I hope he is, honestly. I would prefer that he is dealt. And he takes another bad stick infraction penalty. I talk about it all the time. He slashes Simon Holmstrom, so it becomes a 4-on-3 for the Islanders. But eventually it's a 5-on-4, right? The Lafreniere penalty ends, the Horvat penalty ends, and the Trocheck penalty is still on. Not much time left in it. In fact, only 3 seconds left of it. And it would be Andre Palat scoring his 5th goal of the season, first as an Islander, from Holmstrom and Schaefer. And really, Palat just kind of finds a soft spot in the slot. A nice little pass by Holmstrom. And again, just Palat has, sort of the position, takes the snapshot, and scores past Spencer Martin to give the Islanders a 1-0 lead. Again, not surprising that Palat would score against the Rangers in his first game as an Islander. And then only a minute and, 10 seconds or so later, the Islanders take a 2-0 lead, and it would be Simon Holmstrom scoring his 13th goal of the season, assisted by Tony DeAngelo and JG Pajot. This is a faceoff won by Pajot against JT Miller in the Rangers zone. And it would be DeAngelo getting the puck at the point. And, basically Holmstrom beats Will Borgen. And again, Will Borgen's play has left a lot to be desired for a while now here as well. And Holmstrom just is able to tip it in with a pretty easy goal past Spencer Martin. So in quick form, it's 2-0 Islanders. But then one of the more disappointing Islanders, Jonathan Drouin, high sticks Vincent Trocheck at 17:33. So, hey, look, as much as I criticize Trocheck for take the penalty, he does draw the penalty there. And the Rangers do score on the power play. Power play lately, despite last game they went 0-for-4 against the Bruins, like, even without Fox, and now without Panarin, it just looks like it's got a little bit better flow to it. Now, I don't know how long that, again, for as long as Fox is out, no Panarin, who knows how that looks. But at least in this case, they score, and it's Mika Zibanejad scoring his 22nd goal of the season for Miller and Gavrikov. And this was just basically, a nice pass by Miller to find Mika in his wheelhouse. And he's able to score past Riddick for the Rangers' first goal against the Islanders this season. Basically, they almost completed, 7 periods of action, and they finally score to cut the lead to 2-1. We go to the second period, and I thought, for large stretches of that second period, Rangers were the better team. Rangers were, off of that Zibanejad power play goal, they were, getting back into it a bit. Chances on both sides, I would say. But Rangers felt like they were right in the game. And then everything turns on a sequence where somehow the Rangers get 3 penalties and the Islanders get none, which was kind of crazy. Let's talk through it. At 9:41, Sam Carrick gets 2 separate penalties, tripping Kyle McLean, cross-checking Matthew Barzal, and then at the whistle, at the end of it, Matt Rempe boards Mark Gakholm. Now, look, I agree with the tripping on Kyle McLean that Carrick was called on. The cross-check of Barzal, you just don't see it called. Like, in a situation where they already had a delayed penalty, you just don't see that called often, right? Like, by letter of the law, yes, he did cross-check Barzal, but I just don't know that it was one of those things, that needed to be called. And then Rempe at the end of it boards Gakholm after Rempe was getting involved in things. Again, and part of it is just there's a klutziness to Matt Rempe. There just is, where he's not great at staying on his skates and he falls down. There was a play earlier where Cizikas got hurt, where Robertson hit Cizikas and Rempe kind of fell into Cizikas. So I think he ended up being okay. But so they call the boarding on Rempe. I guess, I don't know, whatever. But then McLean just kind of jumps him. I'm just shocked that it ended up being 3 penalties to none. I'm glad I didn't want the Rangers to win. Then I would have been like, what the fuck is this? But it ends up being 5-on-3 for the Islanders for 2 minutes. And then after that expires, 2 minutes to 5-on-4. You don't see stuff like that often. I wonder when the last time that was, honestly, where a team had 3 penalties. Now, it happened to be where Carrick was involved on 2 of them. Um, so yeah, just craziness all around. And so it's the 5-on-3 for 2 minutes, and the Rangers actually kill it off, and quite well, I might add, is like the Islanders didn't get that many chances on it. So with that, Rempe comes out of the box, but they were unable to kill the end of the second Carrick penalty. And look, there was probably about 30 seconds left on that one. So they were almost, you know, they had killed off 3 minutes and 30 seconds of action. And again, 2 of those minutes was 5-on-3, but Barzal scores his 13th goal of the season from Holmstrom and Horvat. So give Holmstrom 3 points at that point, at that juncture. And, not a great job by Spencer Martin, where he kind of goes from left to right, and Barzal was open, but he was way out. It was from distance to Martin's right. And, I think, a more NHL goalie, not to say Spencer Martin's not, but really he's more of a third goalie. Probably gets there and makes that stop, but Barzal scores to make it 3-1 Islanders. And then another sort of Islanders twice did this, where the goals 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, quick succession. This one even quicker. In 47 seconds after, it's Pajot scoring his 11th goal of the season from Gatcombe and McLean. And this was one where, McLean basically beats Robertson to the puck. Laba was in the vicinity. Gatcombe puts a shot towards the net on Martin. And then Pajot just kind of gets the loose change and backhands it in front. So this was the third line that was on for the Rangers at this point, the Laba line with on defense. So, maybe this is wrong. It says that there's 4. That can't be right. That's got to be NHL. I'm seeing four Ranger forwards and 1 defenseman. That's got to be incorrect, I'm thinking. Either way. Oh, no, sorry. That's not the case. It is correct. It was Robertson and Morrow that were on. And I guess the reason for that would have been, post-penalty kill reasons why they did it that way, right? Because I think typically it would have been Robertson with Borgen and Vakanainen with Morrow. But anyway, that makes the 4-1 Islanders. But then the Rangers do score at 15:42, so only a minute and a half or so later, it would be Taylor Radish scoring his 8th goal of the season from Laba and Borgen. So that third line who gave up the goal scores one here. And, it's Borgen just, kind of dumps it in, goes around the boards. Radish gets to the puck first. Gives a quick little pass to Laba, goes back to Radish, takes it to the net, and somehow it just goes in past Riddick. Not a pretty goal, but it counts nonetheless and cuts it to 4-2. But then the Rangers do give up another goal at the end of the second period. Emil Heineman scores his 15th goal of the season from Pelican Palat. So Palat a 2-point night. It's a goal at 19:12, and the Trocheck line was on for this one. Islanders passing it around. Cooley's unable to kind of get the puck out. Islanders keep it in. And Borgen kind of does a crossover. Lafreniere's in the vicinity, and it's just an easy shot for Heineman to score past Martin to make it 5-2 Islanders. Third period, not a lot to discuss. There was one power play for the Rangers. Bo Horvat tripped Lafreniere at 7:28. Rangers don't score on it. Islanders pretty much locked it down. Very low event third. And the Islanders win 5-2. And they outshot the Rangers 36-16. The Islanders have won all 3 games against the Rangers, and they will go for the season sweep. I mean, it's funny. The Rangers swept the Islanders last year, and we kind of know how that went, where, in a way, you could look at that as a reason. And there's so many different variables and factors that you can't just look at it in a vacuum, but it ended up not doing the Rangers any good because they didn't make the playoffs, and the Islanders are the ones that ended up getting Matthew Schaefer. So that situation didn't work itself out. Again, it's, the Islanders, are right in the mix to make the playoffs, and the Rangers, I'm just looking for them to get as good a draft pick as possible, despite their, lack of success as far as drafting and developing. I still want to be in the position where you can still get the best possible players you can. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens as far as Panarin's concerned. At this point, anything's on the table. He could certainly be dealt, by the time that Islander game at Madison Square Garden takes place. We are at that stage right now, clearly. And, that is kind of where I think the main focus is if you're a Ranger fan. Um, is, what is that trade? What are you getting back? And again, it's more of the off ice stuff that's interesting. But Rangers, beaten soundly by the Islanders at UBS Arena in the first game of the back to back. Now it'll be the second game, the final game of the season versus the Islanders, and this one will be at Madison Square Garden. And what I'll say is this, and it shouldn't be a big difference, but obviously to this point in the year, the Rangers' road record is exponentially better than the home record. I suspect that with getting the better matchups at home and the Rangers roster really becoming depleted, that you're going to see more. And again, this isn't a bold statement, although maybe it is because of what we've seen this year. The Rangers may have some more success at home than on the road. Again, it's probably negligible. They're going to lose way more games than they win. But, I think the ones that they might sneak out, right, these overtime or shootout wins are more likely to come at home. That's been evident to me beyond the wins and losses. Like the games at home, I know there's been some really bad ones in the mix, right? The Ottawa one comes to mind, but they are getting beaten pretty soundly on the road, just from a shots on goal perspective and things like that. But so now again, Sorokin versus Quick. I would expect a little bit of a better game for the Rangers here. Again, that's also not saying much considering the Rangers were, beaten easily in this one, right? So it's an easy thing to say, but I'm not saying the Rangers are going to win, but I could see this definitely being just a closer game, but we'll see how it goes. But Rangers lose 5-2 to the Islanders at UBS Arena in the first of a back-to-back. Now they will head back to Madison Square Garden to again face the Islanders, and we will await the news on Artemi Panarin as he was held out for what was deemed roster management reasons as a trade is looming, and Artemi Panarin has, in all likelihood, played his last game as a New York Ranger.